Good evening. I would like at this time to call to order this special meeting of the Finance Committee, and I want to thank each of you for taking the opportunity to be here for us. I know it's an extra meeting for everyone. I want to call this to order, and let's get that done first by pledging allegiance to our flag, and then I will ask the Reverend Ken Dawson if he will lead us in the prayer. If you'll all please stand and remain standing.
Thank you. Let us pray. Father, we again come and give you thanks for the blessings you bestowed upon us and your protection. And Father, as we remember the situation of all those that we're in a pathway of Harvey and all the devastation in our neighbors in Houston, we ask that you give them the strength to recover from such an event, the resources to see it done, and the will, God, to not to stop until their communities are restored. And Father, as we pray for this next system that possibly is heading our way or could strike some area of this country, we pray also for your protection and your help in dealing with that. As we go through this meeting tonight, oh God, we ask for your wisdom and guidance in doing the people's business, in which we will continue to always give you thanks. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Ken. This meeting is being held tonight in a special location in the governmental building for the reason that the council chambers is having some construction work done there, electronic work done, and so it was either postpone this meeting, which certainly is a priority for all of us, or hold it otherwise. So tonight, as a result of some really, really exhaustive work by P.J. Peterson, Lester Kenyon, Marshall Courtney, John Connolly, under the leadership of Brandon O'Day in the technical department, we are actually broadcasting live from the governmental building. We were not prepared to do this. We thought we would be taping, but these gentlemen that I have mentioned previous went to work and made this happen. And so as citizens of Ascension Parish, you need to be proud of the technical team that exists in this organization, what they were capable of doing in a very short period of time in order for all of the public to see without delay this report that Dr. Slaughter will present momentarily. To go back a few months, we asked Christelle Slaughter and her team at SSA to do an effectiveness and efficiency study for the parish of Ascension. The parish president was amenable to that, and what we hoped to accomplish was to find out where we could, what areas of our work needed improvement, what we could do better, what our shortcomings were, what our organizational structure looked like, and how it should look in the future. It is our goal to provide good government. And the only way to accomplish that, in my personal opinion, and I believe it is shared by those in this room, is to have a correct organizational structure manned by qualified men and women whose goal is to have an efficient and effective and transparent government in Ascension Parish. A lot of work has been done over the last several months with the help of the administration. From what I understand, the parish president, the parish CAO, the chief financial officer, and certainly all other members of the staff who were called upon by Dr. Slaughter and her team were cooperative and helpful and have made it possible for her and her team to present tonight the final report of the work they have done. This is just the beginning. This work just gives us something to go on, just gives us a place to start. And we are going to be asking Dr. Slaughter to help us in the future with ordinances and work that we can do to make it, to authorize this report into law. Its recommendations, I guess, is the more appropriate term. But in order to make this work, all that has been done, all the recommendations that have been made, we have got to put this stuff into ordinance and follow through. If we don't, then once again, money has been wasted. People accuse us all the time of wasting money. And sometimes, I have to admit, some of the things we have to do seem like a waste of money, and perhaps they are. This one cannot be. And I am committed, and I believe that the other members of this body are committed to, and I know that the parish president and the administration is committed that we will put into ordinance the work that has been done, the recommendations that have been made, so that we seriously accomplish good, transparent government for Ascension Parish. I thank you, Dr. Slaughter, for being here tonight with your team. I was not, I hated that we were a while getting to this spot. But it does not, this kind of evaluation does not happen overnight. It involves the work of a lot of folks. So with no further ado, Dr. Slaughter, if you will present your narrative, and if you will please go back over your original recommendations, I would appreciate it. And then, of course, we will open this up. I have I guess I take it, give me Christelle, if you'll give me just a moment.
Absolutely.
We have, Jeff, would you like to take your opportunity to speak publicly now?
Yeah, it's, I'm neither for, sorry.
You go right ahead.
Thank you. I'm neutral on this. I asked the lady if you had a neutral card.
Well, we're happy you're here. Please go ahead and
I'm looking forward to getting the final report. It's something that's needed. I recalled mine, Parish President Matassa promised to implement the recommendations that Dr. Slaughter and her team are going to bring before the council and the citizens of Ascension Parish, and I think that's great. Every organization needs to take an inward look at some point and look at efficiencies and how effective we are in what we do. So I do look forward to her report finally coming to light. I did get my question answered about what it was going to cost the citizens of the parish, so that issue has been put to rest. And I do know that when we had the slideshow that Dr. Slaughter and SSA presented, it was areas of concern for us as a parish in the way we operate our government. But what I didn't see yet, and I hope to see tonight, are the recommendations to change our table of organization, our TOE, and how we can make our government more effective. And I'm hoping to see that tonight, especially in light of what I've noticed on the parish website over the last couple of months. We have 4 new departments created, and that were not previously on our organizational structure. I don't recall them coming before the parish council, which by ordinance, any new departments created had to come to the council for approval by ordinance. I haven't seen that. I'm hoping that things like that are rectified, looked at with due diligence. Because at the end of the day, it all comes down to spending the dollars appropriately. And what we all need to recognize, and I know you do, is that y'all are stewards of the public's money. And to spend it effectively in a manner to serve the citizens of the parish, that's y'all's job. The fiscal responsibility of spending the parish's dollar rests with the council. So I'm just looking forward to some good things tonight, and I know it'll be a thorough presentation. I hope it's as in-depth as what I've come to expect from watching SSA over the years and seeing the quality of their work. And I hope I'm not disappointed. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Terry?
Yes, Aaron.
A 2 or 3 minute break to get some writing utensils and pens on this end?
Sure, sure.
I'll run to the office. Writing 1, 2, 3, 4. You think I can type that fast, though, Jay?
They need pens.
Oh, we had that?
This is extra.
I see everybody in the center has them all.
This is an extra pad.
All the-
pass them?
We're going to have some kink. We're going to have some kinks in this tonight.
See, it causing trouble already. I don't think we.
She's gonna get some ink. Give us a minute.
I'm not hiding.
Yeah, Chuck, you want to pass out? Maybe pass out. He's gonna give y'all something to write with. Right on, yeah. I got one. Aaron didn't come. Two of them.
Thank you.
How many you need? One more.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Watch this law, you're stealing his,
That's right, it's a sore spot office.
Service bus?
Is that part of the new efficiency? No, and,
There'll be a council pen that we have to share.
That's usually in my pocket, and I do like that. It's in my truck.
I'll try not to say it,
30 seconds to read it.
and then ask questions.
Okay, everybody ready, gentlemen, to resume?
Unless you
Dr. Slaughter, are you ready?
students would have me ready.
Ready?
Well, Councilman Kluwat has figured out that the screens are behind you. So we'll figure out what to do about that.
It's okay if we all turn around that way.
So that was quite a challenge, that hoping that this would be as thorough as some of the others. I figure at some point these meetings are a bit dry, and it's not always the exciting pieces of information. It's really the substance of government and government services. But we did want to present, we were, I think Councilwoman Casa was referring to the fact that we were readying the report for your last regular meeting, and then learned that there was an effort to have a special meeting to go through it, which I think is a very good idea. I do think that it's packed with information, and so we're prepared to cover some of the high points and answer questions, and then if there's other information, we'll be happy to, come back afterwards. Let me see if I can get a little closer. I'm so short. All right, let's see if that's a little bit better. Is that better?
I don't know.
Can you turn
Does
the
it?
volume
It's not
up?
in the room.
Can we turn the volume up in the room, John?
There's none in the room. Okay. But I can
I'll have to
certainly
turn my
speak
good ear to you.
louder. I'll just step further away from the microphone. So for those of you with the report, we'll be going through some things, and for those of you who can see the television monitors, and for the people who are viewing this off-site, we wanted to go back through the project scope just at a very high level, and what we were asked to do, and what we have done our best to try and bring to you. So in a few short bullets, we were asked to assess the allotment of personnel, financial, and equipment resources that are used to provide services to Ascension Parish residents, examine the parish's organizational structure and operational practices including the services that are provided, the staffing, the workload, and the organization itself. Identify the strengths and areas for improvement within the different departments of Ascension Parish government, and then develop recommendations that would improve the efficiency of Ascension Parish departments, including but not limited to personnel, number, how they are deployed, outsourcing versus doing things yourselves, finances, time on task, resources, equipment, fuel, technology, etc. As you know from our prior discussions on this, some of that information was more available than others, and we have continued now for about, I think we're in our 12th month of bothering your staff and department heads to try and track down bits and pieces of information. I can't thank them enough, and especially the poor finance department, who seems to have weekly requests for explanation or information. So what do? We benchmarked personnel, financial resources, and equipment as much as we could relative to other parishes. We talked about that in the very first meeting, and differences and similarities between places like St. Tammany Parish, and then some of the smaller neighboring parishes like St. John and Livingston Parish. We compared your current organizational structure and major operational practices to best practices, not only here in Louisiana, but best practices that we know of nationally. We do more work within the state with public organizations, but we are frequently having to benchmark whether it's compensation or Department of Public Works, mowing metrics and asphalt, or pothole repairs to other places that have similar types of issues. And so we were asked to look at things, and we did look at things such as quality, response time, and customer satisfaction. We spent time on site with some of your people. We did interviews. We looked at policies and procedures. We asked for standard operating procedures and reviewed those where available for the major parish processes. And then we come to you with this final report with recommendations for improvement. We do have some very high-level estimated cost savings. We also have some cost investments, and by the end of our discussion tonight, we want to present you with a table of those and ways of tracking that for the length of your term, and for the people, those of you who will continue on and those who will follow you as council members. In the last meeting, we had 11 priority recommendations. I think we gave the opinion, or we left everyone with the opinion that these were the only recommendations, and they are not. These are the big 11, and so just to highlight those again, we felt that there was definitely a need to reorganize and very much stabilize parish government. We'll talk about when we began the study and what was going on at that point in time, and some of the disruptive moves that have occurred with the organization as departments changed, or different functions were moved from one area or one reporting relationship to another, sometimes for the better, but even then it is a disruptive event. And so we continue to believe, and do have a presentation tonight on what we are recommending to you as the true organization chart, as opposed to what we looked at last time with positions and something that will allow you to continue growing within a leadership team that should be good for a while. We continue to believe that developing a performance management system and revising your personnel policies is one of the top opportunities for improvement in terms of creating a productive and effective workforce and providing citizens with the services that they need and expect. This is the backbone of any organization, and certainly in public service, a great part of your budget has to do with personnel, and so managing those resources to the best of your ability is most important. Number 3, improve productivity. Again, improving productivity, this time through mandatory leadership and supervisory skills training. A number of the anecdotal observations and information that came to us had to do with the lack of well-trained supervisors and the fact that people in some cases fear retaliation, in some cases morale is just bad, but we are not seeing some of the opportunities for motivation and true innovation and improvement. Our experience is that people don't come to work and want to do a bad job. And a lot of the people who have the best ideas about a particular situation are those who are closest to it. They're not the people in this building or in fancy offices or not so fancy offices somewhere else in the parish. And so getting those people to get excited about what they're doing and wanting to help is right down the road. And I am convinced that you're going to see some amazing things and now have people inside parish government who are going to be able to tell you those stories as they happen. Number 4 was to modernize the parish's information technology. Number 5, establish departmental dashboards to enhance transparency and highlight progress. Number 5, require quarterly budget to performance reporting, and this is extremely important and one that we'll spend some time on related to the organization structure and establishing true departments and relevant information about that. Establish stronger communications outreach with the public. Number 8, evaluate fleet usage and reduce fleet cost. We have some updates for you on that. Number 9, develop a forward-looking vision for Ascension Parish. And number 10, continuously evaluating and upgrading parish standards, regulations, and operations. I think that there is one that is left off. And I will have to figure out which one that is. It's in the book. Because this study has gone on as long as it has, this is like being in a science lab and studying an organism that is changing while you're studying it. So the good news is that we've had the opportunity to watch preliminary discussions turn into actions, status reports given to the council turn into policy or procedure changes in day-to-day operations of government. As Councilwoman Casso and I were communicating by email with the CFO about setting up this meeting, I said we're challenged in the final report because many of these interviews were done before changes were made. Thank you. And the changes that were made now make some of those comments less important. Maybe not totally gone away, but maybe less important than they were before. We had to pick a point in time and stop, so we did that. Not before we went to the website and totally reconverted everything, only to realize that that was just on the website and had not actually been done and moved around like the boxes sort of seemed to imply. So we went back to our original work. What you have in this final report is the compilation of the work that was done during the middle months of this study, which was the most intensive time. What we wanted to do is share with you developments that we've seen that might be going past us, but are very important to consider when you look at where you were and where you are now. So to that end, when we started the study, and you will see in every single department analysis where we did actual interviews of key people in the department, many of them bemoaned the fact that there were not regular meetings of department directors, people who had to collaborate with their peers to get things done, whether it was Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness or Planning and Development or DPW, just to name a few, need the ability to to talk about complex problems and deal with things with their colleagues, and sometimes have some prioritization from the CEO or the CEO's top staff. We did not realize that meetings at some point started happening, and so there is a Monday morning meeting that Ken Dawson conducts with the key department directors. I'm not exactly sure, it's not all department directors, and I'm not sure what that small circle is, and Ken would have to talk about that. But clearly that was needed and extremely important. Those are the kinds of things that are very difficult to quantify, what comes out of that, preventing a problem. We were working in a neighboring parish that will remain nameless, but you'll probably figure out who it is because they have a big sewer issue. And when sewer and DPW don't talk, then you end up building a road or repairing a road and then having to come back and pull it all up again to put your sewer in there. And you only need to do that 2 or 3 times before somebody says, gee, we ought to meet about this and collaborate on our planning. So this is very, very good news. And there are very few organizations, public or private, that could survive as many times as we don't like to go to meetings, and a lot of meetings are not productive. Knowing that there's a regular meeting and focusing on priorities and having efficient meetings is really important. So that's nice. That's a good accomplishment. In the course of this study, there was tremendous frustration from you as council members, from department directors, from a number of different levels about a lack of procedures or inconsistent procedures, the sense that personnel policies were not updated. The whole area of human resources came into play, and you do know that most of the 11 recommendations, or a fair majority, a fair number of them, have to do with personnel issues. The one that I left off, my handy team with cards, ensuring that all employees meet minimum requirements for the job, we'll talk about that in a minute, was one of those. So during the course of the study, in fact, fairly early on, the former Human Resources Director moved to another role, and that position opened up. We were asked to help do really a nationwide search, and someone was hired in August of 2017 who does have experience in the private and public sector in HR, has a master's in public administration, law degree, but lots of years of experience in customer service oriented organizations that are highly people driven. So that to have that happen in that period of time, it will sometimes take 6 months to a year to accomplish something like that. And I think a lot of you are very supportive of that, and we appreciate that help. There were concerns in interviews over the number of cars and pickup trucks that were assigned to Ascension Parish government employees, and we did bring forward some best practice examples from other parishes, and this may be a little known fact. Again, I'm not sure which key employees or key staff members in the President's office or around the President's office are following a new procedure, but the new procedure that is going on is these people do not have assigned vehicles anymore. It mirrors what I believe the Ascension Parish School Board is doing, and for example, St. Tammany Parish, which is to ask people to use their own vehicle when they are on parish business to record that mileage, and the mileage only for the time that you were using your vehicle for parish business is reimbursed at a standard rate. So that's only a part of the organization. We'll tell you a little bit more about the rest of the organization, but that was a positive change in our opinion, more in line with best practices. Recommendation 6 encourages transparency and accountability through the use of dashboards. And so, lo and behold, I came to one of your meetings and all of a sudden I saw a dashboard on the screen. Here's our caution about that. The balanced scorecard came into corporate America many years ago, and all of a sudden, executives got very excited about showing that everything was on track. Well, that doesn't really do us any good. So if we're going to shoot the messenger when somebody comes and says we're a little bit behind on this plan, or we missed a milestone on this, you will not get accurate reporting. You need accurate reporting on the few big things, the critical few things. We think that maybe we thought 15 or 20 until we started making a list, and then it was more like 20 or 25. But there are some things that are very important that ought to be coming to you on a regular basis, quarterly, if not more frequently. The dashboard that has been created, which is really very well done, has to do with the 11 priority recommendations, and that's great too. You may remember that we could not find a lot of metrics, but when we get to that in a second, some of the important ones, I think we do see ways that they can be captured. During the course of the study, you did approve the enterprise-wide ERP system contract. We felt for you. You really did this by the book. You hired a company to come in objectively and look at things, and then you went out in the market, and then you didn't get the response that you expected. And that's tough in those kinds of situations. It's tough to know what to do. Fingers crossed that everything turns out superbly. I feel like it will, because that company has done good work in other places, not dissimilar to here, but continuing to wait to make that decision, we think would have been a mistake, because what we see your staff going through with databases that are not connected, with questions that, I've asked Wanda in HR, we asked her a question earlier this week, and, she's got to manually pull information off of Excel spreadsheets that are in different locations. It's just not how organizations are run today. And with the ability to pull reports at the push of a button, I think your decision makers will have a lot better information with which they can bring you recommendations and decisions. So this is a big one. I think when people look back at this moment in time for this parish, they'll realize how important that was. It has to do with everything. You're working with the public, business and industry, et cetera. Stronger proactive communications. We visited with the people in communications. We brainstormed a lot of great ideas and ways of doing things differently, and the next thing you know, they were happening. So that sort of gutted our chapter on communications. We didn't even talk about YouTube videos, and then the next thing you know, I was reading that you all were doing YouTube videos. So you may be ahead of everybody else that we work with on this one. You're televising important committee meetings, and I have to say, that's really great, because if you think about your drainage committees and some of the places that are of real importance to people, that's some of what they want to see. Regular council meetings may be a little too high level for that. But we definitely see much more proactivity. We'd like to see more, pushing things out, having more interaction, but I think this is a good foundation for that. And finally, in the acquisition of the People's Water Company, that was coming along as we were starting the study, and it was apparent in the beginning that you didn't have a lot of leadership there to lean on. I think over the course of several months, it's required Ken Dawson and some other people to really spend more time on that than we think is warranted. In addition to which, as I've said before, and this area can pose some risk in terms of regulatory risk, and it really does need to be tightly managed. So we have offered in the extension that you all approved on the job title study to help your HR people and the parish look for a highly qualified person to be over that area. And we have some suggestions on that. So of the 11 priority recommendations, there are really 4 that we want to talk about tonight. and that is reorganizing and stabilizing parish government, which has to do with organization structure, establishing those departmental dashboards, and the metrics across the entire organization to enhance transparency and highlight progress, require quarterly budget to performance reporting to the council, and evaluating fleet usage and reducing fleet cost. There are some other ones that we will be going through as well. But let me start with that. And to take you, those council members who have the hard copy books in front of you, you will notice that the first part of the final report is the executive summary. And so that's designed to just be those top recommendations with a little bit of methodology. Then it goes into the background, which we covered, I think, in fair detail in an earlier meeting, and talks about comparative measures with other parishes and their size and scope and some similarities and differences there. We then go into approach and methodology and the highest priority recommendations. And by the time you get to page 24, you've really caught up to where I've gotten with the slides about what has already been done. On page 26, there's some general observations and findings about the departmental level analysis, or sort of looking a little bit deeper. And, you know, we did have general cooperation from people. As I've mentioned before, this was a little bit scary to some people, and we did not receive a lot of standard operating procedures or checklists. We found some of the things that we were given, like purchasing and the personnel policy manual, very out of date and needing a fair, heavy-handed revision to bring them up to date and to get them where they needed to be and communicated to the right people. People were very candid at the department level, and I think some of that had to do with frustration because we were operating at a time where people had expectations, and again, with a lack of meetings, a lack of collaboration, people felt like they were really out there on their own, and here comes these consultants to tell us everything that we're doing wrong. So I think that contributed to a little bit of that fear and distrust. On page 27, we give you the departments that we focused on. So not all departments are in here, or what was called a department at the time. There are a few like the jail or health, mental health, technology that we spent some time with, but didn't spend a lot of time on. Although we did interview some of your customers on those things and had some information about their satisfaction level with services. So on page 28, we begin looking at departments, and actually the President's office is in the budget as a separate budget unit. We called that administration, for lack of a better term, and that's where we were able then to get into the organization structure and really flesh out some of our recommendations. So if you remember, we looked at the budget from 2016. There was an old organization chart in that budget, and you went for 9 months without any update to that. So people were hired into positions that didn't even show up necessarily on that organization chart, contributing to some frustration. About 9 months into it, an organization chart kind of came out in an effort to try and rationalize that and try and create functional categories that would get us further along to getting the organization structure, the jobs defined, matching with the compensation study. We brought to you last time something that we saw as a functional organization chart. and it was just meant to illustrate, here are some of the levels of the organization, and here's how some of the functions could work together in more collaborative sorts of clusters to help with accountability and to get the results that you were looking for. It was not meant to be a true organization chart, and I apologize to whomever spent the time on the website to take it and convert things, and then I fell in the trap myself looking at the website, and I thought, gee, we need to make our report look just like this, and then I realized it was our organization chart that they were trying to mirror. So I think we had a little bit of rework there, but it's not for naught, because I do think listening to you all discuss that and hearing your reactions to it, and the parish president's office and a few department heads' reactions to it helped us to hone it down even further. And so what we bring to you tonight is a real organization chart that actually has people on it, which is what organization charts are supposed to have. And you got to have really good eyes to see this one. Thank you. So on page 31, for those of you with the book, you need really good eyes to see that. And then in the appendix, you see a larger version, and that is in Appendix D. It's D. Appendix D, which is the last page in the report. This is really pretty simple, however, so, and I think it's pretty rational. It's the very last page in the report. Oh, I'm sorry.
The last page of the book, you said?
No,
Very last page of the book,
that's
Jim.
incorrect.
All the way to the back.
It's different. It's gonna be a
Nope.
bigger version of the whole thing.
I think they inserted the wrong one. We're going to need to work off the one that's unfortunately on the screen that is in the book on page 31. This one is not blown up in the back. So what you have, of course, is the parish president.
That is the one right there.
That's it. That's it.
Page
Is
31.
that better? Page 31.
Or if you want to see it bigger, the very last page in your book.
No,
Now that's,
Casso, that is
I'm
not
sorry,
correct.
I'm
That's
sorry.
the functional one.
I'm
Not
lost
it.
again.
That's the functional one.
Okay, that's the font.
So page 31, and then on the screen, it's a little bit bigger than it was before.
Wait a minute.
It's pretty simple. It has parish president at the top and the same 3 direct reports that have been there over this period of time, which is your finance department, your CAO, Ken Dawson, and your legal department. So those are direct reports to the parish president. Those are the 3 direct reports. From there, you have the CAO depicted with their direct reports. And so Ken Dawson's direct reports include the 4 boxes immediately below his, which are purchasing, communications, human resources and information technology, which are internal departments. And then you also have Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness and Planning and Zoning. Those departments, several of them have very high priority or strategic types of issues, and they could be combined further. You've had things combined until recently. Your purchasing director reported to your finance department until recently. But at this point, because of the nature of the information technology study that is so large, the human resources issues. Turn the lights out. Think that would help?
There's too much glare. I can't see that at all. That's better. That back bend would be, there you go. Thank you.
It's like an eye chart. Is that better? E. All right.
Left to right.
So, again, you have the parish president, and then you have the parish president's 3 direct reports, including the CAO in the middle. The CAO has some administrative departments that report directly to him: purchasing, communications, human resources, and information technology. He also has Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness, dotted line relationship between that one and communications to the parish president. And then the CAO also has Planning and Development, reporting directly to him. From there, our recommendation is that you have 4 division directors. These are not meant to be departments. However, your current public works is considered a department. The reality is, when you look at the budgets of those subunits, they're pretty large. Your drainage budget being one of the largest budgets in the entire parish. So one of the points that I think we have to talk through, and you have to think about, and your administration has to think about, is how granular do we get? In our opinion, you already have your budget broken down into equipment and maintenance, pavement management, vegetation management, and drainage. So to us, it makes sense to keep those as budgetary units. And you do have Bill Roos serving in that directorship for Public Works. To the very left, you see something that we think is a really good option for the parish. You have a couple of issues that we studied to a fair extent, one being utilities, as I mentioned a moment ago, but the other one being transportation and engineering. So during the course of the study, transportation was taken out of Public Works and made a separate sort of entity. Engineering, when we began, had been dispersed and changed from the way it had functioned before, and you lost some talent out of your engineering department. You have not really backfilled those positions. We have spoken to quite a lot of people and looked at what other parishes have done. We know your interest in moving forward on infrastructure projects and getting orange cones out and things going as quickly as possible. And so when you get to that section, you will see some of the thoughts that we had about that. What we believe you should build, given the size of the parish, where you are and where you'll be in the near future, we think that having a few strong engineers and contracting out design, which is more the model of a DOTD, quite honestly, makes a lot of sense, rather than taking a lot of valuable resources and building a strong engineering department and then expecting them to do everything, because it's the combination of skills that you need. So even though we do have some concerns about a very thin line of defense in transportation engineering, we think you're okay because of the model that you're beginning to use. We do believe, however, that in the search, which was a search for the utilities director, that if you can get someone over this whole area, as you begin to look at what you're going to do with sewer over a long period of time, your water, your sewer, sanitary sewer, your transportation engineering, all sort of fall into that category of infrastructure and providing some of those services to the citizens. Clearly, that's not the only way to do this, right? And we've had people say, well, why don't you put drainage over there? Why don't you combine this with planning and development? Why don't you? All of those are very worthy options. And I have to tell you, from an organization design standpoint, there's pros and cons to many of them. We recommend this one because we think that we're not overloading someone's boat. We felt like the functional organization with 11 or so direct reports to Ken Dawson was almost untenable, especially where you had areas that really required more oversight and more direction. If we can get someone to take on not just utilities, but something else important like your infrastructure projects having to do with transportation, that'd be quite a coup. When you go out into the market, you don't know what you're going to find. You don't know what's going to present itself. May be a little bit different, but the opportunity to have that level of management and covering some of the areas that are important to the parish, we think is good. To the right, you see what is not dissimilar from what we brought you last time, the facilities division, and then the departments under that would be the jail, Lamar Dixon, recreation, and maintenance of facilities. It's a confusing term because it's not road maintenance, it's maintenance of facilities. So those have some opportunities for efficiency and for collaborative services, especially where some equipment is concerned, maintaining fields and Lamar Dixon, recreation, et cetera. So we think that works well together. The one completely to the right is Health and Human Services with a division director there. And that would have just what we said last time, mosquito control, the health unit, animal control, and grants. And that seems to be a relatively similar grouping there. We heard you when you said that you wanted to codify some of this. You wanted stability, you wanted something that wasn't going to keep changing and moving around. Again, this is our recommendation to you. After many, many hours of discussion, interviews, thought, digging into things, it is not the only way to do it. But it does provide you with the opportunity to see really the three levels that you would have in high-level supervision. And those would be the boxes that are on here. The individuals in those positions are the people that you need to hold accountable to run this parish for you. So this is where we would stop. We do recommend that you put this in an ordinance. We've gone back and forth on that, but part of the main reason is so that everybody will call the departments the same thing. It's rather confusing now, and we'll talk a little bit more about why that is and some of the things that happen. So we think that by putting it in an ordinance, you give it greater permanence. You would be able to list the major functions of each. There is potentially some overlap. When we interviewed some of the directors, one would tell us they're doing this, and someone else would tell us they're doing that too. You know, having that laid out in an ordinance would help. Be a good way to try and get more transparency and stability. But you are going to need to be able to have some changes. The changes should be infrequent. They should be planned. They should be very deliberate. And they should be paired with some kind of return on investment or something that somebody's able to come to you and tell you why this is important enough to change it. So you're trying to balance locking something in stone with opportunities to maybe have a more rational approach. But even though organizations and people are dynamic, you need to move more that way. You do need to have some flexibility. You do need to be prepared that if you put this in an ordinance in some sort of way in 90 days, they come to you and say, we think we need to move this or change this or redirect this. That's sort of what you ask for when you put it in an ordinance. But that would be a transparent process and planned, and people would know that it was going to happen. So it should not have the same disruptive effect. And we can come back to that because I'm sure there'll be some questions there. In your charter, it does outline the responsibilities of the CAO, the legal counsel, the CFO/finance director/treasurer, and the human resources director. And it also outlines the formation of a human resources department It gives you, as council members, the power to form departments with the 2/3 vote of the council. So you do have that power, and again, we would stop at the department level, putting things in an ordinance. However, we do believe that your budget document should have a TO, a table of organization, or some kind of organization chart in the budget document for every department. And that should be submitted by Human Resources in collaboration with the department head to Finance. Shouldn't be chasing people down for that, but you ought to be able to see generally how that department is structured or organized. Not unrelated to that is this idea of departments, department directors being held accountable for the resources that they have. This is not in place right now, and in fact, your employees are not accounted for by department. The easiest way to find employees is by the funding streams that fund their position. So to us, this is a legacy of something that's happened in parish government for a long, long period of time. This isn't anything new. Now, do they have a list of all departments and all people in a department? Yes, that's there. But the reality is that when we went to do the compensation study, the first thing we got was what stream the funding came from. And all public entities do that. They braid streams of funding together. So that's not unusual. You have terrific tracking methods. There's nothing wrong with that. But we want to help your management team to get more comfortable with the idea that there is a locus of responsibility and resources that go along with that and expected results. And that you want people who are good and competent and can manage to that. And then with metrics being reported back to you. In the report, we talk about this both in the section that has to do with administration and then again in the finance section. I want to make this really, really clear. Your finance department can't do this by themselves. They can't. It has got to come from the top. So it would be likely, just like vehicles are tracked through the finance department, it doesn't mean they're responsible for any decisions made on vehicles. They are tracking and reporting. So this really has to be a policy type of decision that is made by the administration with the support of the council if you want it to happen. But to us, once you get past the human resources issues and some of those basics, this is really where you got to go. And this is a multi-year process. Now, I think you can make great strides right away, but this is a cultural difference as much as anything else. And being able to have someone and ask them to report on their head count and allocation, and knowing that somebody isn't going to come during the dark of night and pull out a pod of employees and they'll show up somewhere else, well, that means then I got no excuses anymore. This takes excuses off the table, not that anybody was trying to do that, but we think that this is something that really can help you move forward. We also don't think when they come to you with their quarterly reports that they need to be all good news. You can read that online. So this brings us to personnel headcounts. And in the report on page 34, we were asked towards the end of the study for some specific information from different people about headcounts. And we went back in and tried to get a handle on things. So we looked at the reported budget in 2016 and the number of full-time equivalent employees then versus the 2017 budget. And that is noted on the slide and in the report. So in 2016, you had 420 full-time employees in the budget. In 2017, you had 420. In 2016, you had 393 and change on both. So it's a net difference of about 26 positions. Now, I'm sure Doc would weigh in on there's statistics and there's data and you can twist them and do all kinds of things with them. This is factual information, but I will tell you that it's very aggregate, and it's not a one-to-one match, if that makes sense. So more than 26 people were hired during the year. Some people left. Some positions were attrited and never to be filled again. Some positions were created. But trying to go back in a manual system, and this is where your system does not allow us to find this out for you very easily, and track that would be extremely painful and almost impossible on a large scale. So a difference of about 26 employees from year to year. There's no corresponding calculation of salary or wages to the total budget that was in that budget associated with those positions. We also were asked, out of curiosity, let's look at the last year of the Tommy Martinez administration, employees that were hired in 2015, and let's look at this year, this past year, the first year of the Matassa administration in 2016, and that, again, required manual calculations. By the time you net out, for example, things like temporary or seasonal employees, at one point in this year, you hired people into Lamar Dixon, and then you outsourced those concession workers. We netted those out. Your staff netted them out. And then the acquisition of People's Water had about 13 net employee positions, as well as looking at 2015. What you end up with is in 2015, there were 58 employees who were hired in that last year. 58 employees who were hired in that last year. And in 2016, there were 53 employees who were hired. So pretty comparable there. Again, not including those People's Water employees.
Christelle?
Yes, sir.
Does that account for the people that left in those years?
It doesn't. It's
Okay.
a net number, and so that's a good question. That's the issue we ran into.
Because generally, if you've got an administration leaving, you have a decent amount of turnover.
That's
People taking
very true.
retirement, hey, I spent my last 8 years with him, I'm hanging it up, whatever. But
Absolutely.
people coming in, same situation in opposite direction, things
Right.
like that.
Right.
Well, I just noticed you got this in bold print and green
Yeah,
square.
we thought it was very interesting.
So-
We didn't know what we were going to find. It was a little interesting journey to find that out. So, not necessarily apples to apples, does have to do with people leaving. And the other point that I would make is remember the aging workforce that you have. So you may see more of that in the future. We do not have the Citizen Service Department on the organization chart. We found out very recently that there's a pilot program that's going on in DPW for this, and we're very happy to hear that. That it's extremely important that you are responsive to citizens, and that you as council members know how many people are calling from your district, what are the kinds of questions that they're asking, what's the response rate, and I think that this will be a very, very helpful pilot. Public Works is where you're going to get most of those complaints and issues, but it's not the only place. So that's the only thing that we would go back and communicate with the administration to figure out how we expand it maybe out of Public Works. But they can certainly lay the groundwork, and I understand they're having some good results. I just heard that tonight. You need to be tracking service response times. You need to be tracking the cost and headcount allocation, and we can't really do that without that information. So that takes us from page 34, where we talk about Citizen Service Department, to performance measurement dashboards. And if you can get here, it's sort of like you being on YouTube. If you can get here, you'll leapfrog many, many, many parishes and counties of comparable size. starting on page 35, we give you some examples of what we think would be some of the top metrics that you would want to look at on an annual basis and some even more frequently. So you would probably want to know your number of employees, total FTEs, and total payroll costs. And by a certain date, that would be captured in the columns. It would say what was the prior year, what is our target for this year, and then what is the actual as you go through it. And then for some of your key areas, when we visited with animal control, it was after the flood of 2016. They were very challenged. They have an interesting public-private partnership with CARA, and we think that that's pretty innovative. And we think that, you know, those are things that show progressiveness in a parish government. So just on an annual basis, looking at how those are going. In addition, since CARA now is your vendor, you ought to be looking at that to make sure that they're living up to your expectations. Communications, number of viewers, with both Ascension 21 and YouTube per month. In finance, we talked with your finance director a good bit about the bond ratings. You have enjoyed good bond ratings, and you have been rewarded for your fiscal responsibility recently by a rating agency. And as we look around the country, that becomes more and more important and is harder and harder for some municipalities and county governments to deal with. So we want to make sure that that's kind of front and center in your thinking. The 6 months of operating funds held in parish reserves, we had thought about parish reserves per capita. So as you grow, are you increasing your reserves sufficiently? That is related to your bond rating, and something that I think has really been an asset for this parish government. I do think that with all the needs that you have, we talked about being a wealthy parish. When we came and talked about the compensation study, you're not that wealthy. Sewer systems are real expensive. That goes without saying. Road projects are very expensive. So that's where prioritization comes in. But I do think that your ability to have a consensus agreement with administration on how far you want to go in terms of dipping into any type of reserve or spending or things, decisions that you would make that might affect the bond rating are pretty important ones, and something for you to consider, because you enjoy a wonderful position right now with that. Human resources was a little bit tough, because if they're doing everything right, they don't even usually show up on this. Sometimes turnover is an issue, but you don't have a lot of turnover. Since you need a good performance management system, we thought that might be something that you would want to track for a year or two. Starting a pilot program, what kinds of compliance do you have? Lamar Dixon, your staff may be able to come up with better measures or things that are more the industry standard that they would want to do internally, but what are you able to capture in terms of cost coverage from Lamar Dixon? Revenue per capita might be interesting. Facility maintenance, you clean buildings for other people, like the sheriff. You do things within this department, and it's for your own employees and you and the citizens who come in to access services and deal with elected and appointed officials. We ought to know how satisfied they are. We ought to know if people feel like buildings are clean, if the air conditioner is working appropriately. You have challenges in the comp study. We found out those are some of the positions that are hardest to fill. And so, are we able to keep up with that? Planning and development was a tough one. I don't think we've gotten the best one here. Building inspections performed within 24 hours of request. It could be subdivision reviews. You got to help figure out, but you definitely need something in there. And this is a big area in a lot of different places. In some parishes where growth is an issue, where we've worked, like Jefferson Parish and St. Tammany Parish, they would probably have had 2 or 3 different indicators in this list because it was that important to them. Public Works, fleet maintenance services, cost per capita or cost per vehicle or heavy equipment. Public Works, acres or linear feet maintained per FTE. Pavement management, this is an interesting one, and in looking at all the options, we give you a lot of options in the body of the report, but percentage of citizens who are satisfied or very satisfied with traffic flow on major roadways. Again, you don't always just want to have good news. So if they are very dissatisfied, and then at the end of that year, they are somewhat dissatisfied, and then they're neutral, you're making huge strides. So don't be afraid to ask people what they think. Don't be afraid to have comment cards or any of that citizen service pilot to get bad news that just lets us know we need to do a better job. Miles of rehab, streets and roads. We did find a metric on this. It was very interesting. It popped up in a place where we did not expect to see it, but you did 25.68 miles in 2015. So somebody knows how to count that, and they're doing it. In drainage, in 2015, 2,059 miles were maintained. It'd be very interesting to know, since the flood, what's been happening there and where you are. We also think that linear feet of drainage ditches cleared by month would be an interesting one. That may be an example of one that comes to you more frequently than quarterly. It may be something that you want to stay on top of. Purchasing we'll talk about briefly in just a minute. Turnaround time on purchase requisitions, satisfaction. They have a couple of areas that would be good there. Recreation, you just don't have very much here right now because your programs are more outsourced than we see in a lot of places. So number of parks, even satisfaction with that from the general public might be interesting, which is on page 37. We think that your ERP project is a great one to track. They'll have a great Gantt chart and project plan. This won't be hard for them. Are we hitting the milestones? And if you're able to look at that on a periodic basis, it will be no surprise by the time you get further along and realize, we're in trouble now, or gee, we're real ahead of our schedule. Transportation, again, similar type of thing, number of projects completed on schedule. That could be anything. That could be a number of dollars that you're drawing down from the feds or state government. Utilities, something having to do maybe with violations, drinking water quality or other types, number of users, and then sanitary sewer. In 2015, you had 143 miles. What's your expectation there? Where do you want to be? So we are really interested in this. This is not something that's been done. It is not going to be fun for your department directors. And some of the things that seem very simple on here may be hard to count, much more difficult to get that data. Then if so, then let's try and find something else. But I think, commending people for even, trying to get that information to you would be wonderful. So let me just give you a few highlights in the interest of time for some of these other areas. The departments are listed in alphabetical order starting on page 37 of the ones that we looked at. And on page 40, we end up with looking at finance. Your finance department does a lot of work for a lot of other public entities. A lot of work for a lot of other public entities. I just want to say that again. They do a lot of work for a lot of other public entities. We didn't see a whole lot of funds being shifted for those costs. So that's just to put in the back of your mind. Again, on page 42 is where we start talking about budget transparency and the help that we think your finance department needs to be able to make that more important. And then on page 43, we do give you an update on vehicles. And so we know that there's an effort to move away from the number of pickup trucks and vehicles that you have. This is not heavy equipment types of things. The parish owns or leases at this point 249 pickup trucks or cars. So owns or leases, that's not distinguished, but that's your current fleet. So we think you need a long-term strategy for that. We think that that's an opportunity for cost savings. You know, we would not like to think of you losing money by selling an asset, even though it's somewhat depreciated below market value, but you are spending time and money maintaining that, less with your own employees, more on an outsourced basis, but it's still something that we think can and needs to be looked at. And on page 44, we give you the car allowance information, which, as we mentioned before, the President's office has already adopted for key appointees. I would suggest we go now to probably purchasing is the next one. I believe that we had concerns about purchasing. We heard about purchasing from many of your users, and your purchasing department is very much like purchasing departments of the 80s. Part of this, again, is because you're dealing with manual systems. Part of it is that they have to have someone in each department who is helping to fill out requisitions, or that's not a full-time job, and you know, they've gotten somebody in DPW to help with that. But your purchasing department closes for a few weeks towards the end of the year to be able to update and get things done. And unfortunately, that's an important time of the year for some of your departments. Dealing with specifications, you have some unusual things. Lamar Dixon is very different from things that you would normally be purchasing for in other government agencies. So this is an opportunity for a whole separate study. I'm just going to tell you. You can do better. You can do better in your procurement policies, procedures, response times, downtime for equipment because they're waiting for a specialized part that's not really ordered right, et cetera, et cetera. So this is one that, again, didn't make the list of the top 11, but as you start knocking those off, which you're doing a nice job of to begin with, this is one that we think has opportunity there. Again, being manual is a problem. On page 68, we talk about transportation and engineering, and I think I've covered that at a high level, rather than creating new specialized engineering positions. We think that you need to stay with your combination of some in-house engineers who are able to manage consultants. They've got to be managed, as we've talked about before. They need to know enough to know if they're doing a good job. Having a part-time person over that area is not sustainable long-term. I think you got good talent, and that's been terrific, but again, that's where we think you have an opportunity to improve. Utilities, again, in the search for that. And then let me talk a bit about the job titles consolidation and where that will go. So the project is in progress now. We actually had a meeting with your new HR director and staff and Ken Dawson, but we had so many other things to cover, we didn't get deeply into it. We have reviewed where we stopped with the compensation study, where the job descriptions are in terms of being current and where those needs are. We know we need to get that information to you very quickly and work with Human Resources to do that, because honestly, you do need that for your ordinance creation. So what are we calling those positions? Are those positions at the same grade level? Does that make sense? Is the amount of responsibility equivalent. So in our testing, it was, and that's why we brought that to you. However, the job titles do pose a bit of a challenge, so we need to go back in and figure that out if you want to put that in the ordinance. We feel very strongly that the departments need to be named, whether somebody is a manager of an area or a director of an area. That may not always be equal, but we need to move with great haste on that. Okay, did I wear you out? Madam Chairman?
Yes.
I'd be happy to answer questions. Go to their notes.
Why don't you, Christelle, why don't you give everybody a minute to kind of digest and get themselves reoriented to the book, and then we can begin on one end or the other and let everybody ask what most significant questions that they have. I can't imagine that we could answer from all of this material all of the questions, or even have created all of the questions in our own minds that we will have until after we have had time to study this. But there may be some, glaring questions that individual members of the Finance Committee have that perhaps you could help us with this evening. OJ, do you want to start on your end? Benny ran out on you.
Benny outsmarted you on that.
Yeah? Oh, no.
As usual. Mr. Smith, I guess, listen to it. I mean, everything you're in the file, I pretty much knew that, okay? And I already know how basic me personally felt about our government. And basic, your report is just telling us that we didn't know what the right hand was doing and the left hand was doing. And we've been operating like that for many of years. So, I mean, I have to, give Parish President for his agreeing to go along with this, and the council to go along with this here, to do this evaluation. Because some of us been here a long time. We know we had some, deficiencies in a lot of programs here. But we just really didn't have enough initiative to bring it forward to the public.
Right.
And so, once again, I have to, compliment Parish President and Administration and this council for taking that leadership role to let the public know we are working on their behalf, and to let them to know that this is a transparent thing, and it's a team effort. Because we hear them crying or complaining, but government is not working for them, but we have to first know where the problem is to solve their complaint. So once again, I'm asking the citizens of Ascension Parish to be a little patient with us. We're heading down the right path. And I just want to thank everyone on this council and the administration to at least move forward this way. That's all.
Thank you. And I would echo that. And, the attendance at these meetings is extraordinary for council members. I have to say, we don't often see that. And it's an indication of your interest and commitment. I will tell you that the most common, now that I've become deeply associated with Ascension Parish government and this study, the most common comment that I hear is, boy, you're saying all the right things, but they're not going to change anything. You can't change it down there. And you're proving them wrong, which is why I wanted to show you the developments, but you can't stop. And some of these things really are going to take a while to do. But I think, being, as you said, willing to do that, having the cooperation of administration is half the battle. So I agree.
And I'd just like to comment, this is open to the public, this information that you have given. So they will have the right to read it, to look at it, and somewhere along the line, they're going to have their input. So they have to keep us accountable for this report. So everyone is watching, and hopefully we are going down the right path and we do the right thing. Once we accept it, once it get approved.
We're going to move on to the next questions by the Finance Committee members. Mr. Dawson, are you prepared to ask your questions tonight?
I can give just a couple of comments. Believe it or not, I don't have any questions, but I do have comments that, pick everybody up. I agree with Oliver that, I appreciate the administration. I appreciate the Finance Committee, especially the people who were involved in this. That, it's a very worthwhile effort. I look forward to having some time to digest this. And, I think we're going to be a better parish because of it.
Since you didn't have any questions, you go to the bonus round. This will get me in trouble with the audience, too. And my team will drive off and leave me here tonight when I show you this. This is something that Bill Dawson requested at the beginning of this study. And it is a modified Gantt chart. It's not really a Gantt chart, but we got a guy in our shop who can probably make it into a Gantt chart. But it's all the recommendations, and I mean all, even the small ones, what we think in terms of their priority, what kind of time frame, and then where we did have costs, either investment or potential savings. And I sure wish that there were more columns that were full, but after tonight, our commitment to you is that we're going to go back and flesh this out and get it to you so that it'll be a living, breathing document. I told Ken Dawson earlier, right before this meeting, I said, this will be your report card by the time we get finished, so thank you. And I believe the report is a public document once it gets out there, so it will be available to everybody.
Thank you, Bill. Is there anybody on the other side of you, Doc?
No, Travis, not here.
Travis is missing.
I thought I saw Travis earlier.
He did, not at this, but her.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right, Doc.
Thank you, Ms. Castle. And thank you, Christelle. A comment and then several questions. And I'd like my colleagues to my right, I'd certainly like some time to study this. I mean, it was just handed out. We all know that. I believe the gentleman handed me the thing, said, here's your hymnal for the night. And albeit I didn't come here to pray, I'm glad this process is over. I would like time to study it and therefore reserve the right to ask more detailed. There's a lot to digest here.
Yeah,
All right. My comment first, albeit it was probably out of order too. The question has been asked from the audience, when will the narrative be available? Well, I've got an answer for everyone. Immediately. It's a public record. Whomever wants it, feel free to contact me and I'll be gladly to supply you or let you copy my document, which is your document, which is our document. After all, who paid for it? The taxpayers of Ascension Parish. That's the comment. Question number one. Christelle, and I'm going to try to get your words as best I can, dear. You know me, I'm an old college professor, and I take copious notes best I could. Got a little bit of a stiff neck tonight, so I had a little trouble getting around and seeing it all. But I believe you said when we were talking around page 28 that people, quote unquote, were being hired for positions not even listed in the Ascension Parish organizational chart, and I think you're referring to the 2016 chart is your finding.
The 2016 chart that was in the budget.
I knew it was going on too, but I find that very, very troublesome, and I think that's a good reason why we have some of the problems we have in inefficiency in this parish. In fact, you pointed out later, correctly so, the media's been all abuzz about this, that our homeroom charter kind of defines how we create new departments and who has the power to do so. Is it the consul? Is it the parish president? And so forth. And without belaboring the point, it's in your report and everybody's going to get to see it. Those who aren't educated are going to find out real quickly who should be doing that versus maybe who is. But I view that as to be the problem. But I'm not worried so much now about problems but solutions. How can we solve this? I want to be sure I understood you. You say that we should put this in an ordinance. An ordinance is law. All right? Now, that can happen in many ways. Again, if you look in the homeroom charter, we can amend certain things without having to convene a homeroom charter, although this parish may be heck bent very fast going in that direction because of what's going on with a Better Ascensions movement and the other group, Ascension concerned citizens and even others that want to do all kinds of things with the homeroom charter, from term limits to you name it. But I would think that you've hit upon something there. I totally agree. We ought to be putting down this department is forever. When I say that, with the caveats of what your company found, which is that, it should be deliberate. I think you said it should be done, with real thought and purpose in mind, and not easily fixed after that. Otherwise, every time we have a change in leadership, and I think Mr. Kluhat was sort of referring to that, it's been the old-fashioned to the victor belongs the spoils. This gentleman, maybe one day the parish is fortunate enough, this lady wins the office and comes in and decides what he or she wants to do. I believe that's too old school to be productive anymore in Ascension Parish. I think I'd rather see him have to jump through some serious hoops in order to, and that would get rid of all these morale problems we talked about tonight, all these issues with employees who didn't want to maybe participate at the level they could have or should have when you asked them, because they feared. I read in here, everybody don't have a copy of this yet, one of the biggest problems was fear of retribution. Simply has to stop. So I want to be sure, you're saying that you think this should be in the form of a law?
Yes, and I think that you will still, if you go down to the department level, you will still allow your leaders to deploy resources as effectively as they need to deploy. We're not totally tying their hands or limiting the number of people that they could have. You have a lot of room to do those kinds of things. But you would be able to track better, for example, resources, allocation, one year to another, one issue to another, and you really can't do that now without something. I spent the last 2 days at BREC, Baton Rouge Recreation Department, doing analysis of their human resources area, and they've had the same general construction of their organization structure probably, I don't know, for decades. But the human resources person was very flexible in terms of, well, we had this golf guy up in Ohio, and, this position didn't fit him. So we said, well, let's take the job description and figure out how do we maybe take these 2 jobs and change this in the job description, and can we get him in for that? So I think that you still allow some flexibility, but the places where you need the consistency is for your ability to look at what's going on in the citizens as well. So we're looking for a balance there. And Doc, I came late to the ordinance idea, but
right.
I do think it would eliminate disruption.
Well, I agree with it. I don't know about the rest of my colleagues, but we'll see. I was looking at page 29 in that second paragraph. You state, when the parish administration changed in early 2016, and I'm quoting you, this organizational chart, we just talked about it, no longer represented the structure and reporting relationships established by the new parish president. We understand why. A new organizational chart was then published approximately 9 months later, and then I think the one that we had to squint to see is going to be even a recommended, perhaps new one, if we decide to use it or whatever this group decides to do. What I'm concerned about it, and it's just so many areas, again, I want to digest this, but the one I talked about in the past, I'm going to talk about it again tonight. You said, quote, we have lost a lot of engineering talent that has not been, quote unquote, backfilled, these positions, meaning they have not. And I believe you concluded that we need to hire some engineering talent, which would be keeping with, you said, other parishes. Now, that's not specifically stated. At least, again, I haven't looked at it in detail, but you stated it verbally, maybe not stated in text. Would you care to go on record again about that?
Yes, I'll be happy to. When we worked with the state to create CPRA, and we took resources from the Department of Natural Resources and DOTD and the Governor's Office of Coastal Affairs, engineers were a limiting factor. And so, whereas Scott Angel was not happy to give the governor 120 positions. The 120 positions weren't all his engineers, and the same with DOTD. So you have a very thin line, as I said, in that transportation and engineering department or division at this moment. And what we advised CPRA at the time and the governor, as well as the DOTD secretary, where it was really important, is you have got to have, as I said a little while ago, people that you have confidence in who can manage your consulting contracts, who can know if a design is worthwhile. And that means you've got to have PEs. You've got to have maybe one, maybe two talented, people that you can count on. If you got one and they leave, they get attracted off, and now you're back to square one. So there are a few places where we think the parish is a bit at risk, and especially if you're going to begin pushing money into contracts, and great, you need to be doing that. You need to be aggressive. You need to draw down every dollar that you can and get things going. But you do need the staff to be working with your vendors so that you get exactly what you are expecting from them. Does that help?
Yes, it does.
I know in our notes, and we have some pretty detailed notes. Cody and I spent about 4 hours one night in our conference room with someone going over this. Again, having a part-time person, a talented part-time person over that area was a bit of concern. And then having, younger people and people who maybe didn't have the experience that you needed, and that was it. It was just that thin line.
Right. Now, Christelle, you said also, and I captured this, in discussing the proposed sheet that was eventually handed out, okay? Mm-hmm. Figure 5, I believe it is, somewhere in here, that you, quote, thought the 10 departments that were reporting to Mr. Dawson was an untenable situation. Do you feel moderately strong about that, just slightly so? It's a whole lot of responsibility.
So your CAO
This is not a comment of Mr. Dawson's abilities, or anybody would hold it if we kept it organized that way. Right. It's a question about, should anyone be, saddled with that amount of responsibility and expect that we'd be still, efficient? Right.
It's a great question for a number of reasons. One is that, we can look at the organization and from a pure structure and design standpoint, and then you can look at the individual, right? So let me stick with the engineering question. So your CAO also happens to be an engineer. You don't want him signing plans in a perfect world. I mean, you don't want him stamping. I mean, you just don't want him doing that.
Right.
But he could, and so he could go into the utilities department every day for 8 hours and oversee it and drill down. But again, what we think is ideal is to have enough talent in those leadership roles under your CAO, no matter who it is and what their background is, so that that person doesn't have to do that forever. So how many strategic projects can you expect a leader to take on? A good leader, you can expect that they would take on a lot, but not while they're running day-to-day operations somewhere. So as you get, more consistency, I think, in that next level, then you're able to do that.
Right.
We'll see people with, 20 departments under them. Again, is that a good idea? Well, if you have really professional people running those departments and you're not having a lot of problems, yeah, okay, it's not broken. But when you're starting to have problems, then, that span of control may be too large. But we have seen spans of control
right
in getting exceedingly
and just to be clear too, like, we are fortunate to have an engineer, but that's a nuclear engineer, and this gentleman is now pressed into service. I don't know whether he wanted that or not. I've never spoke to Ken about it, to oversee people's water when we acquired it. Mm-hmm. And my understanding is that, knowing, it's almost like all engineers. You got civil engineers, you got industrial engineers. My brother's an electrical engineer, and like MDs say, they all specialize and they're different. And so to me, I like this idea that, especially when you put up there, you might want to say another word about that. Hope my colleagues really, really pick this up. Basing thing on departments and the expertise within the same, super, super, super important.
Super, super, super important.
Right, and I think we've already started to remedy some of that. You recognize that in the recent hire of Ms. Talita Wesley in our human resources group. Okay, we don't have all the time, but because you skipped, we skipped a whole bunch of departments because you can't, alphabetically though you listed them. So I was just kind of looking at a few of them that we didn't talk about. Legal.
No, keep going. We'll come back to it.
How about legal?
Oh, yeah, I'm glad you brought this
well,
up.
my question about it, reading your recommendations and so forth there, is that we may want to consider hiring a personal attorney, which is within our codes and stuff to do, or stick the way we do it through Ricky Babin's office. Could you maybe be a little more specific? Would you? Are you willing
I'll
to
be happy to
make a recommendation there?
So we started this so long ago that there were things going on in East Baton Rouge Parish with their parish attorney's office. In some of the initial interviews, council members asked about legal resources and, what does the council have? What does the parish president have? We went back to the charter, and you do have the opportunity to hire your own legal counsel. I think that, we've seen that done with mixed results, quite honestly. You need somebody who's not going to worry about if their contract's going to get canceled if they tell you something you don't like. You need top-notch opinions and legal help. It's very rare for one attorney to be a good employment lawyer, contract attorney, litigation attorney, because it's like engineers, as you just mentioned. But if you have a good resource, they will know when they need more expertise, and they will access that for you or recommend it. So we're agnostic, honestly, on that. We have seen some things in other parishes that were of concern to us, where we had different attorneys, and it added to the conflict between administration and the legislative body. We would not want to see you go through that, but we do know that you need somebody to turn to when you have legal questions. So that was in response to specific questions from council members about can we do that if we ever wanted to. The answer is yes, provided in the charter.
Excuse me.
Yes, Mr. President.
We do hire attorneys for special. Tim Hardy, okay, he's a utility. We got on the agenda Thursday night for a guy that does right-of-way. So we do hire attorneys. Now, we got a contract with the DA's office, and that's how we use our regular attorney. But when we need a specialist, we hire them.
Good point, thank you.
Yeah, I understand how it works. I've been here long enough to know that, and I thank the President for re-educating me. But I'm more concerned about, actually, you kind of described some of it, who the person's answerable to and who's paying the salary and getting what we really need sometimes in terms of correct, complete legal advice. But I think you've said enough there. On page 60, the second, let's see, was it the second bullet? I captured that for some reason. It caught my attention. Yeah, and this is in discussion for the audience's benefit. I believe it's Department of Public Works, maybe? No, it's Planning and Development.
No, it's
which I think
Public
is
Works.
a real heavy hitter
It's
issue in our parish. It states training for employees is accomplished by shadowing more experienced employees. There is no official orientation, no training period, no training manuals for new employees. It is not unusual for an employee to show up for work at the director's office with no direction about their job title and responsibilities. Wow. That's a very strong finding, listed under findings. So, to correct it, again, interested in solutions, who should we task as a council to write these training manuals, et cetera, and get this problem rectified with our existing personnel?
that is going to be an enormous undertaking. So you will task your human resources director with updating an employee handbook, personnel manual. That will take care of things like, I don't know what my job is, or I don't know what the basics of working in Ascension Parish government is. But the fact that it's mainly a job shadowing program once you're hired on is not ideal.
I think this
that's
relates-
a supplement.
Yeah,
Not the
excuse me for
prime
interrupting.
section.
This relates to morale that you also talk
Right.
about in a
Right.
couple bullets downstream from that. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'd hate to go to a job and not know what I'm supposed to do
Right,
and get there even that day and not know, and then not actually have guilt for collecting a check.
right. Well, and in addition, you're missing some opportunities in industry, and
Clearly.
I love to use E&I people, because really talented E&I people are engineering and instrumentation are hard to find, and the good ones know they're good and they're divas. And when we go in to diagnose problems in E&I units, I always try and figure out who is the most talented person there and what role is he usually or she playing in the conflict. And oftentimes it is because they do not feel appreciated, and therefore knowledge is power, and good luck getting any of mine. And what we've helped a number of our SMART clients do is to take that very talented person who really doesn't want to become a supervisor and probably would not be a good one, but incent them to help train people and to mentor people when they come in. And it'd be very easy to do. You're doing it anyway, but it has nothing associated with that task. Again, with the amount of institutional knowledge that's going to leave here because of the age of some of your employees, this is something that we think is important. Now, when does Bill redo that? Between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m.? I don't have a good answer to that. I think some of these things are going to be important enough. You can contract a little SOP on something, 15 or 20 things out to somebody. You can find maybe some resources inside the parish that could, sort of be SWAT teams. You can have some creative solutions to it. Some will be slower than others. But there's a lot of work to be done. It is not unusual in parish government.
All right,
When we went in Jefferson Parish, there wasn't anything written down about how to do all kinds of things.
Right.
We just knew how to do it because we'd all been here for forever.
And my last question, more of a comment, and I want to end on a positive note. Everybody says Doc's always the harbinger of doom and the naysayer and everything, so maybe I can get my colleagues in the general public to cut me some slack on this. You also said, and I quote, the public-private partnership established with CARA, that SSA thinks that it's innovative, but to be sure that they, and you list a whole bunch in the next several pages of groups like them, are meeting our expectations under the topic of metrics, which is a big, big issue for me personally. So the idea of metrics in terms of accountability, I think we probably can't put that in ordinances, but certainly these procedure manuals you're talking about, it's going to take a whole lot of time of writing. Mm-hmm. We could agree maybe as a council or whatever that here are the following things that we're going to use, not just for CARA, like what's your kill rate and how many did you successfully adopt out and how much money did you raise independently of what we give you, or whatever the metrics are. Mm-hmm. All of these organizations, which becomes an issue too of their being able to brag and have pride and come in front of us when they give these quarterly reports you talk about, mm-hmm. and then come forward and say, well, your codes or whatever, your manuals say we're supposed to have this, supposed to have that. We do. Here's what it was before we started turning things around. Here's what it is now. We're making progress or not, and I think that whole situation would be better. So just a general comment of the importance of metrics.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that that's not just that organization, because AEDC came to mind because we happened to be here when the new director came and introduced herself. They do a business retention program where they go and visit existing businesses. You all need to hear what they are hearing when they go there, because when we talked with some of the top employers in the parish, I know we heard things that don't get to you all, because there's unless you bump into somebody church or the grocery store, they happen to mention something to you. But there's a lot of good information. You have a contract with them, and there should be expectations that you're going to hear that. They don't need to come take a whole special meeting or dominate anything, but they ought to be giving you some high points and, potential risk factors if there are some. We heard them. They had to do with traffic, egress, emergencies in certain roads, evacuations from some of your industrial people, but even from some other smaller people. If the budget is made up of a lot of sales taxes and, if we need more money for sewer, are we going to raise sales tax? I mean, just things that are on people's minds. So my guess is they're your economic development arm in a sense. They might have some good information.
And let me offer this metric that you have on top of page 38 concerning the Humane Society of the United States. It says that your research shows they spend approximately $8 per capita for animal shelters. By the way, is that a yearly figure?
Yes, it is.
I need that information because we'll be hearing a strategic planning committee later next week request for more funding from CARA, which is the second time. They didn't get it the first time, but they were a new organization. We had just turned it over to them, and it was a decision of the council, perhaps wisely so, to see how they performed. Now we've seen them for a year, and we've seen what they did, of course, in the Great Flood of 2016 at Lamar Dixon and so forth. But just fuzzy math, $8 per capita, and we have 20, the chairman over here says 120,000 people, so it's about $1 million. And
Yes,
we're giving
it
those
is.
guys about 200
I'm
grand.
prepared for that question.
Okay.
Because this also would include your own animal control people.
Okay.
Cody spent some time.
But even adding them to the 200,
Yeah.
their budget's quite sizable. It's like probably close to $500,000 I read in the book. At 700, we probably underfunding somewhat there. What strikes me is that the HSUS says they handle on average across America, it's all across America, 30 animals per 1,000 people. Wow.
Yeah.
So that'd be 30 times 120. It's a big number.
Big number, big number.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
You're welcome, Mr. Sauer. Thank you. Mr. Lambert?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it, everything. I guess with your organizational chart here, since we're all going to be open and looking for changes and different things here, as far as utilities, transportation, and drainage, that should all fall under DPW. This parish is moving forward with those three things. Any road project, any sewer project, you have to have this in the mix. We've been there, done that with these engineers. Engineers are going to move on. We're not going to be able to pay them what they want. Simple as that. We have some good ones. I like them, but hey, let's face it, they're going to move on. Your weed control and your other things here of mosquito control, take care of all that under your department, but I'm just looking forward to more open discussion and moving the parish forward. And on page 44 here, you made comment on the mileage, income for retirement benefit calculations. You're saying it should not be counted as part of their retirement.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. So if you're not careful, what ends up happening is years and years of, if I'm your employee and I'm getting reimbursed for my mileage, and then that goes into some base pay in the system and it's not segregated out, then you're matching that, or you're paying 9.5% into my retirement of that. And honestly, that really is ordinary income that should be declared to the IRS, but it should not count into people's retirement calculations. It's not the biggest thing in the world, but it's big to finance people.
Appreciate everything.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dempsey. Ben? Councilman Johnson?
Christelle, one of the things I haven't seen in any of this stuff, going back through the early reports, is anything on the parish president. Do y'all have anything on that?
That's an interesting question. When we do compensation studies, usually the scope defines what individuals you're going to look at. The one that we're doing in New Orleans right now, we don't have Mayor Landrieu or any of his deputy mayors included in that at all. That was just in the scope that they created. Here, we looked at everyone but the parish president. And I will tell you that when we did this study in East Baton Rouge Parish, the fact that the parish president's salary was stuck created big problems, because normally, being the CEO, that person is at a higher level of authority and responsibility, and to get the talent you need to reward them for that. Your parish president's salary, and I just happened to look at it today, also has some stipends associated with it from different funds, and in your 2016 audit, I think it was about $138,000 or something. There are rules of thumb and best practices. We were talking about West Feliciana. They have a formula that averages the tax assessor, the sheriff, and one other elected official, you may remember, who was school board. And so those are averaged together or whatever. What we are most interested in on behalf of the citizens is that there's some sort of calibrated way that the salary can, over time, be adjusted, even if it's as little as cost of living adjustment. It is so painful for a public body to take up the idea of a parish president's salary or a city manager or whatever you want to call it, a governor. It's just painful, and it's you get tattooed with all sorts of political, unintended consequences, but somebody's got to look at it. And in Baton Rouge, for example, when they compared the salaries of the mayor-president to communities that they thought were aspirational communities, we were way behind. So the fact that we were not asked to do that, I wanted to come to you all last time and talk about that. We can certainly share with you some of the things that are being done in other parishes for you to look at. But to us, that could go in with the compensation recommendations that you adopt and move forward with. It's at your pleasure.
I would like to see some of that information included in there for sure. And going back to the organizational structure and going into ordinance form, what recommendations do you have? And you talked about the flexibility within that. Once you do this in an ordinance, it limits your flexibility. So what's your recommendations for building in the flexibility that would be necessary?
There you go. That's right. And Councilman Lambert's comments just now are exactly what I was talking about. So we could have a great discussion for a couple hours to turn the cameras off. I'll sit down and talk about it, and we might come up with something that's different from what was presented, and it might be darn good for a lot of different reasons. It would mean that you would have to follow your regular procedures for introducing something, getting it on the agenda, making a change. So what would happen if I had a candidate, for example, and we were looking to there was a lot of consensus on what you wanted to do and combine or bring in or rename or new, adopt, buy, whatever. And now we've got maybe a 60-day window or something. That is the downside of it. We've had this discussion in our office on Will's whiteboard to where we are yelling at one another about it. And that's good on your behalf. If you go the ordinance route, you do minimize the disruption that you've had, and you do codify some departments for transparency and clarity and stability. It does offer you that. And that is, for where you are right now, we see that as important, and that's why we lean on the side of that. But I will tell you, the first time you're presented with something that has a good rationale and it gets turned down and the parish misses some opportunity, I will feel really, really bad about that. And that, now it's in the political arena. Where are the votes? What's the political emphasis. So I think it's a very good question, and it's a tough question. We helped Baton Rouge change their charter because, and reorganize DPW, because their chief engineer was named in the charter with all the roles and responsibilities, and the parish had gotten too big. You had a very talented individual, but there was only one of him, and we didn't know where they were going to get the next guy from. He was getting ready to retire. It also created a bottleneck. So anytime you put something in a governing body's basic constitution, if you will, man, you make it really hard. It had to go back to a vote of the people. We were lucky 58% of the people agreed with it, and it was explained pretty well. But, Councilman, I do think that how that ordinance gets crafted, how detailed it is, and how far down it goes really needs to be thought through, and then what's the mechanism to adjust it. If we make that too hard, then I think we're just going to box ourselves in. There's pros and cons. I'm sorry, I'm giving you our sort of back alley conversation. Will would like to share his whiteboard musings, which my partner and I are not exactly on the same page. So here we go.
When we looked at this organization, I mean, she mentioned transparency, clarity, and stability. The clarity is the functional part. What are the functions that the government of the parish needs to deliver? Utilities, transportation, drainage. Okay, that's clarity. The transparency then is link the budgets to those groups and the metrics so that you know that you're delivering what you're supposed to deliver on budget, on time. Part of the clarity of those functions is then how many people do you need to deliver it and how should that be organized in such a way that you can keep everybody on track without overloading one person. And normally 20 departments reporting to one person doesn't work as well. You don't want two, but the stability part, which was behind your question then, is, okay, if you put a lot of thought, and whether you we use this one exactly, or you tweak it, or you change it, if you put a lot of thought into how you're going to organize and how you want to deliver those services, and then the workflows and the functions for those, and how you're going to measure all that, you want a certain amount of resistance to changing that. So basically, it doesn't get jerked around all the time. So there should be a certain amount of deliberation and resistance to making a change. That's why, but it can't be too high a barrier. East Baton Rouge Parish, where we had to go in and have an election and change the charter, was a very high barrier. That really can create some issues when you have opportunities or you see things, because it's very difficult to change a charter. You all have seen that in your own history here. By putting it in ordinance, though, you put a certain amount of brakes and resistance. Once you've achieved, everybody agrees this is the way we want to operate, this is the way we want to do it, you put it in ordinance. Then it takes a deliberate discussion and a unified approach of the different people involved to make a change. But you can make a change without having to take 2 years, 3 years to do it. So that's the kind of the balance in there. We wanted some resistance, but not too much.
Councilman Johnson, any other questions?
No, not for right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Cagney.
Just a comment, observation. Thank you for the report. A lot of hard work has gone into this report. You took surveys, interviewed employees, interviewed the council, interviewed administration staff, and basically came up with 11 priority recommendations. So it's a compilation of findings, and with those findings, you've made recommendations. And if we adopt the recommendations, we should see improvement in efficiency, which therefore would feed to improvement in productivity. And the most profound statement I've heard you make tonight, and I think everyone agrees, we got a lot of work to do. But I'm confident we can do it. But in order to maintain it, we have to have measure some values. And I think that's performance evaluations, and it's tracking the equipment to do the work, that sort of thing. So again, I just want to make that statement. It's doable. I have confidence we can do it. We just got a lot of work to do. Thank you.
And it'll take a while. That's right.
Councilman Lawler.
Thank you. Kind of like Rush Limbaugh's people would say ditto to everything that everybody's said about everything you, the administration, has done to get this moving forward. Dr. Williams, he and I were sharing notes apparently, because I was talking about the deliberative process. My notes were about adding a organizational chart as an ordinance, definitely as opposed to a charter change. It's too hard to change, but I think by doing it as a process, as an ordinance, it allows that flexibility to change it, but it requires that a change is deliberative and it is transparent. It can't be done by an individual. It has to be done by a group of people, and it will be done in the public's eye. So I think it's something that we should definitely look at. I must agree that I like Councilman Lambert's idea about moving drainage over there. So this isn't a set form. That's a good idea because, as we heard, East Baton Rouge Parish, if we start doing road work and then we're not communicating with drainage and utilities about the sewage and the drainage, we're going to have a lot of problems. So communication will be a key. One of the things that I noted just throughout here is succession planning and process. And I've gone through a little bit of that recently, just trying to get a dead end sign. And, it's a very simple thing. We don't have a process for it. Is that something that we should be, I guess, going as far down as, okay, if we want to request a street sign, somebody on the council or a citizen, should we have a process for that, or is that going too deep into the weeds?
No, you should. When you look at a city like Austin, we can call them and get all kinds of processes and information. Now, they work in Austin. They're not transferable necessarily. But that's the difference. That's the difference between a very well-run organization and one that's moving from, as you said earlier, where we were clunky and disjointed, and to where you want to go, where you all want to take the parish and the administration. So, yes, and here's a thought about that. Once you get your pilot citizen service, and whether it's in Cartograph or GIS system or whatever, you actually could have staff track your complaints or issues and then pull those to be the top priority things.
That's in my notes.
Great minds work alike, and I know he agrees with me because he's the master of that. So rather than just say, Bill Rue, we want to see 50 things, and then, oh, gee, we didn't catch this one over here. Let's start with the ones that are, 80-20, start with the ones that are going to have the biggest payoff. But, a little training for your staff would help. Maybe there could be somebody that in the parish that could facilitate those kinds of meetings for you. I will tell you one thing that we really thought about early on to tap into, and we didn't. You got a lot of industry partners here. So, could we call Rubicon or Huntsman? Could we call BASF and say, would you loan us a, process Lean Six Sigma guy for a few hours? I mean, we did that in Baton Rouge. We had help on everything imaginable under Tom M. McHugh's administration. So I really do think that, St. Elizabeth's and some of your good people who live here and are committed and who have a lot of talent would be happy to help. And I think that that is not at all too granular, not at all. It's exactly where you should be.
That's a great idea. I never even thought about the partnership with industry.
Yep.
We'll be looking at your company.
Yeah, Randy.
The hiring practices and the minimum requirements, I've put a lot of thought in this and even tried to do some of that myself and realized this is way over my head. I'm not qualified for this. For each of the positions, for a lot of the positions up there, is that the type of thing that we should contract out, not necessarily your firm, but a consulting firm? If y'all can do it, I'm not going in that direction, but my point is, are we as a council truly qualified to do that, or should we look outside?
You're not, but we already kind of did it, kind of, sort of. So, so by the time we finish this job titles and the consolidation, you will have up to date what we were asked by Councilman Johnson a couple of meetings ago. You will have an organization chart and departments and structure and head count, and you'll know what jobs they're in and who people report to and what the minimum requirements for the job are. I didn't put it in the slides, but I do think that those days are over. I think you will not see people showing up in directors' offices saying, hey, I just got hired on, but I don't know where I'm going or what I'm supposed to do. I think that's done. So I think your interim staff worked on that, and I think that your HR people are absolutely checking minimum qualifications, and they are professionals at it, and they're going to do a great job for you. So I think that's just, and I'm so glad you brought that up. I think that's really important and going to raise the bar. But it's not for the faint of heart, because there's legal implications, there's comparability and pay plan implications. So, but you need to know that somebody's doing it on your behalf. And if they need help with it, that yes, they could call people to help.
Great, thank you very much. I don't have any more questions right now. Your team did a great job, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Cody and
Thank
Will,
you.
and I see Anita dropped in.
Councilman Kluwat.
Yeah, Christelle, thank you and your team for the presentation. I somewhat agree with the org chart, figure 5, okay? Based on responsibilities, not necessarily divided how it is or whatever, and that can be moved around. I've heard some talk about, we keep referring to the CAO, right? And, with the amount of people he can manage and all. There's no level in a good organization where all the management is put on one person, including down to the director's level, okay? Most projects, most visions, most everything that's going on that's more than a little routine daily task is a part of several directors, outside consulting, inside consulting, upper management, and all the way to the parish president. Okay, so, I don't see anybody overloaded in this chart. While I believe there's flexibility to move some of the departments around. I do like the human services. All right. And within that, just within good management, the best thing we can do to help ourselves, we talked about it months ago, and you touched on it several times, and we touched on it in meetings within the last year, is find some way to take the employee at the bottom and show them a path to the top and allow training. The HR work that's being done with orientation, and I guess I'm just thrown back at that anybody would show up in a door and not know what they were coming there for, to work, okay? So I think that's a little bit on the employee's part and the employer, okay? I believe somebody's got an idea. I would think that mostly happened whenever somebody was changed from one department, a current employee that was moved totally across the room to another area that they'd never worked in, probably. But we've got to implement employee training. We've got to implement supervisory training on a supervisory level. We've got to continue implementation of our management and superintendent levels and management director levels to train. But the key to all that is communications. That's the bottom line. You can have a very robust IT system. You can smoke and melt a computer down. I've been involved in programs that are the best in the world. And they're so overloaded with bureaucracy that one person in the next room don't know what the next person's doing. They can't tell. It's like talking two languages. So while we can improve our information gathering through a centralized system, just meeting on a department level, staff level, and bringing it all up means a heck of a lot. It's just simple communication. And So, I would like to see parish administration move in that direction, no matter whether they adopt this or anything, okay? Another thing that, you talked about, with one of the other council members, mentioned about the parish president's salary, or the evaluation of the parish president's position. I think we got an outside group that's evaluating that position right now, but within what we have right here, right now, you'd made reference several times about it becomes politically hairy to go talk about, and you made reference to Mayor President Broom, all right? Total compensation, if you just taking the salary, yes, it might look crippled in Baton Rouge, but total compensation and the position that's being held and what's compensated for the position being held may be totally different, all right? You talked about going to the public to raise a salary. We have other parish-wide officials that are making $50,000 easy, more than what the parish president right now is making based on his salary. I don't see that going to the public. That has grown exponentially for 15 years. And to the best of my knowledge, I don't remember voting on any of it. So, I don't know, where we at. I know several of the other parish presidents in the area, all the way from New Orleans back through this way. And, I don't know exactly where we compare. You generally make references, you've been making references to parishes wherever you've done business and where you did studies, okay? So that helps you, at least your facts are there.
Right.
But,
We did a grid recently.
we're elected to do a job, so it's, it's
Right.
Everything we do is politically
That's
scary.
right. That's right.
To some people sometimes, you know what I mean? So I really can't understand why this wasn't addressed to thus far. So, everybody
Again, I
wants
think
somebody
that it
better.
looks
You know
very
what?
self-serving.
We made comments about engineers that we can't keep because we can't break that $100,000 mark.
Right.
Because we beat the industry, private industry's beating them. Well, you got department heads. You went on a nationwide search for a department head.
That's right.
And you had people that were very well qualified in other parts of the country that almost chuckled with the salary we had to offer.
That's true. We lost a very good candidate very early on, who works at a casino here.
So
Couldn't match it.
what I'm saying is just, I don't understand why there was no deliberation in that direction, or look at that. Is it, and you do have a fallback position, because all the positions you talked about looking at are not elected. This is an elected position, so that's why it's scary.
Yeah.
But really, that's being you made reference to other elected officials, I'm just saying.
Right.
That's not necessarily stopping at the parish president.
No, it's not.
Mark in Baton Rouge is the benchmark for what other parish presidents around the area are making, and also elected officials in Ascension Parish right now, parish-wide elected officials.
Right. And it's all public record. So it's very easy for us to gather information, and, you can do it a lot of different ways. You can put it in an ordinance, you can do it a number of different ways to rationalize it. But if you don't do it, and you wait, either to the end of an administration or when there's some issue that comes up about it, then it's harder to deal with. So we need to deal with it when.
Once again, I just want to recap, not take a lot of time, is that a lot of studies went into the organizational chart. It's the second round or so that we've had on the organizational chart. I think you found a definition of most of the areas of need, and we could tweak tweak it a little bit if we want. But it looks pretty good at this point.
Thank you.
And I just want to reemphasize that it makes no matter what we put in writing right here, that we do know that a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with today has evolved over a lot of years. And
That's
even
right.
long before we've had a home rule charter.
That's right.
And a lot of times either departments or people have been tasked with things because they were the person on hand, and sometimes even qualified to do, they were qualified to do something that a task was needed. So I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing all the job descriptions. I think it's going to be very hard for anybody to hit the numbers on how many employees that this department should have and how many that one should have. It's based on need.
You have that now,
I know.
and you can find it fairly easily, but it's hard to really understand how they're deployed and the priorities, and it could be a little more clear and less fluid. That's the important thing.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Going second to last, I guess I got a lot of questions and got asked to you. But
You can just ditto.
one of the recommendations on number 3 was improve productivity through mandatory leadership and supervisory skill training. We do a lot of that already in our departments, because I've talked to several supervisors, managers, while they were at training, calling them, and I'm at school right now training different categories. And I was just wondering why that paragraph's in here, because it's kind of scary, because these guys, I could probably count maybe 15 to 20 that could leave within 2 years or less. They could retire within 2 years or less. And it's scary, in my being here 18 years, you're losing a lot of expertise in all departments, not just one department, all departments. And a lot of the younger guys, are they getting trained? Do they want to get trained? That's another question too, from what I'm understanding. They might not want to supervise a role.
Right.
So what do we do when we lose a majority of your expertise all at one time? And that is where we're looking at shortly, because I can count just by just thinking of some of the head counts, and 15, 20 is not unrealistic.
That's right.
By far.
No, that's not unrealistic.
So where do we go to, catch that, catch up with that,
Yeah.
so.
Let me address the first part of your question. Why do we think it needs to be mandatory, and in addition to things you've already done? Because that's how you shape your culture.
Yeah.
So if everybody's hearing the same message, if they're working on a case study, for example, applying principles of leadership or good supervisory techniques, and they're in there and talking about how we ought to be handling this in the parish, you begin to get sort of a rules of thumb and ways that cross departmental boundaries about how we're going to do things here, and that sort of lifts the boat. In terms of people leaving, best practices in industry, they spend a lot on training, and lots of different kinds of training in excellent organizations, and they are frequently now identifying those next sort of up-and-coming leaders. Even with some of your large employers, we do assessments of people lower in the tiers to see who has the potential. They may say, take me out, I don't want to do that.
Is this something y'all did during this study?
We have not.
Okay, I was just curious
But,
about that.
I think you're linking two really important
Yeah,
thoughts, because,
right.
if you're training the people who are here, and in 2 years, they're all gone, and then we saw this happen in Baton Rouge, where West Feliciana rated their engineers and rated this one and that one, and then this one brought this one over there, and this one took this one over there, and the next thing you know, it was a bare bench. There wasn't anybody there who had been there for a while. So you've got to get ahead of that sort of thing.
You don't realize what these guys do behind the scene, and you don't respect that sometimes, and you take it for granted, and it's, I don't, but, because I know I've been here long enough to know what they do, and I appreciate them very much.
Just speak really quickly, Councilman Lambert. Some supervisors and managers were able to get training, but that was sub-optimized by which department you were actually in.
Okay.
So if your department director valued supervised training and manager training, then you were able to get that. But parish-wide, that
It wasn't consistent, okay.
or consistent. So,
I got it.
that needs to be expanded across the whole.
Appreciate that. One other thing, I seen some of your data here for is per cap, total dollars spent per residence, $1,000 in Ascension, and St. Tammany, which we all thought was real close to our parish, for its size, it's a little bit larger, it's 253,000 people, was $546. Is there an answer to that, or?
That's a good question, and I was more up to speed on those numbers. You're looking on page 20, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
So St. Tammany, has 253,000 people, and they have 845 total square miles. So their geography, so they have double your population, and then their geography is much bigger. They have large swaths of their parish that are extremely rural and
maybe wetlands
are developing differently, and they have some areas that I would say are absolutely no growth, no development, no fracking, no nothing.
Right.
And then they have some areas that are, let's, make this sort of mini urban, multi-use developments and completely different sorts of thoughts there. I do think that part of that may have to do with some of the services that are offered. Their people were well paid. When we did their compensation study, it was not for a lack of paying their people. Like you, they had no real human resources function. I think, Will, you're finishing the fourth study from helping them, third study from helping them. I mean, they're coming from no rationalization, 2 different labor scales, labor grade scales. Really a mishmash of things. But in terms of why it's less for any particular reason, I'm not sure.
Take a whole lot more research. Huh?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I could easily put my finger on that. It's, I think it's a little more complex. We specifically went back and looked at their organization chart in doing this final version, because at one point when we first started working with them, they had a CAO and a COO, and now the COO is gone, and so that's been consolidated under one person. So we went back in to look at some things like that, but I don't particularly remember their departments being much smaller, or talent being less expensive.
A couple more questions, just quick ones. On the vehicles and trucks and cars, comparing to other parishes, is this feasible or doable? Extremely high.
And again, it's one of those things
249 vehicles, per 400 employees.
Not thinking about, and
I know administration is looking at that, so I see that on in this program.
And when I say it's high, because a lot of places are just getting out of the business altogether. They don't want to be. They don't want to have it's hard to get mechanics. It's automotive mechanics are really hard to get and keep, and one-offs, and so we're seeing a lot of movement away from that at the moment.
And then, I guess, after looking at everything, did you look at it, I think Randy might have commented on it, as far as the departments, how many are over to how many are underemployed, each department? Was that looked at? No.
It was impossible to do justice to that because you had no metrics to compare it to.
Okay.
So if your guys are cutting, if they're mowing, and you can tell us how many miles they're mowing, and we can tell you that they're slower, faster, you're doing more with less.
Yeah, that would be tough too.
That's where you got to go. That's where you got to go. And just pick a few.
As far as the organizational chart, I'm kind of like Randy and Dempsey, it's definitely a good start, and if it's flexible, where we can make a few changes and before we actually move on the ordinance, I think it's definitely a good start to move forward.
Councilman Lambert, I didn't answer your question as well as I should have. We drilled down in some departments, like finance, and I think we took that analysis out because I wanted to continue driving through East Baton Rouge Parish. What did I tell you, Gwen? She has 130 employees in finance. I think the finance department in Baton Rouge has 130 employees.
Wow.
So if we would have seen anything that raised a red flag in terms of you all being overstaffed in something, we would have let you know. We did not see that, not with the administrative departments, or, in fact, you know, I almost worry in some areas you didn't have enough.
Yeah. So you probably saw it in no departments, overstaffed.
Yeah. You know, we really did not see that. We really didn't.
Madam Chairman, that's all questions I got.
You know, without metrics, as Christelle was just talking about, you have nothing to compare it to. So you don't know how much work is actually being done by those people. So, you know, if you can equate metrics to, we mowed this amount of grass this month, this amount of grass the next month, okay, how many people did it take to do that? If you add more, did it get faster? Did it get slower? Etc. And then also we take the eyeball test, and then compare it to other parishes that we've worked in. Does this generally seem higher or lower than what they're doing? It's in the same ballpark. Okay, that generally seems correct. Are you providing the same services they are? Generally, yes. Okay, well, that's probably enough.
Mr. Kluot.
Yeah, Christelle. Back to the vehicles, just real, maybe I'm clear this up. You named the number of vehicles, and then it's per 400 something employees. What are you talking about vehicles?
Cars and pickup trucks.
Cars
So
and
wasn't any of your heavy equipment.
You didn't
That's-
get into dump trucks or nothing like that?
No,
Okay.
no.
Good deal. And then the dollars per resident, based on the chart and other parishes that you're showing us. What is your formula for that? Dollars
It's-
per resident?
Very simple. It's a per capita budget,
The
you know,
total- the
ratio.
total-
So,
Total budget
right,
versus,
residents in the parish. We drilled down on that in a lot of different ways that really weren't relevant, but were fascinating to us, that
I
had to
just
do
find
with
it-
their tax base.
I'm
and
sure it's hard to compare exactly apples
It is.
to apples, because the different revenues
Right.
generators for different parishes,
That's right.
all right? And some of them have some very strong revenues in certain areas that others don't.
That's right.
You know,
Since you mentioned it, St. Tammany Parish has a tremendous recreation department and facilities and these kinds of things. So that's going to have a higher. Just using one example, like St. Tammany Parish, which has more dollars per capita, has a much more elaborate, sophisticated, and larger, because they also host a lot of people that come in from out of the parish in their recreation department. So that's going to boost their dollar per capita, but they may get that, they may see that as like your Lamar Dixon, that's bringing in revenue because people are staying in hotels and things like that. So to really look at it, this was just, that number was to give a snapshot, and then if something, if it looked interesting enough, then you can dig into it and look at it. But that would be one example of why theirs might be higher than yours. But you really have to look at the individual services, and you can't look at the name of a department and say, you know, is that given the same services? You've actually got to go in and look, and that's part of like when we talked about the clarity and the function. You may have a department with the same name, but what are the functions that that department is delivering?
but at the end of the day, you put out a chart and you say,
Yes.
and you say something. Yes, we spend this much per person,
And
this parish
part of the
spends
purpose
this
of
much
that
per
chart
person.
was to stimulate the thinking about that and the different services that y'all offer.
I will tell you, and I'll finish my finance example. So in Baton Rouge, they have 130 employees. However, when you do by revenue dollar that they're handling, their ratio is lower than yours. So the reason why we took it out is because we believe that when you are fully functioning with your new ERP system, that if you lost maybe one employee in finance, 1.5 employees, you'd be at about the same ratio as they are. It's just a difference in the actual size. So when you have enough data and you can do that, it is interesting. I do think that you are more manually oriented than that parish in your administrative departments, but I think it's true in your public works, in inspections. People find St. Tammany Parish a delightful place to do business with government, for the most part, not across the board. But for example, in inspections, subdivision development, we worked in both Jefferson Parish and St. Tammany, and people said, I'm not doing anything else in Jefferson Parish. You know, St. Tammany's delightful. They're like working with people in Texas. They get in, they do the job, they're clear on what you have to do, we all understand it, and we move on. And it's time invested well for us. So I think that they've figured out some streamlining and some ways of doing things that are cost effective. Now you've made me curious to go back and see what it is, because neither one of you really is bearing the public safety load, some of the things that would cost more money. So
Yeah,
makes you curious.
You got a chart with numbers. You know?
Right.
And that's generally what people look at.
Yeah.
And it did spark some stimulated, as you would say. Thank you.
I believe Mr. Lawler had one more question.
Just another numbers question. I was going through using my phone to figure out some of the numbers on here. And when we talk about the personnel budget for some of the departments in here, is that pure salary, or does that include retirement, insurance, and all the other extras that go with it?
It's salary. Those are salary dollars.
Okay.
So I don't think it's a full loaded, I don't think it's burdened.
I just want to make sure I had the right numbers in my head, so it's not an issue. I was just curious.
Okay. Yeah.
Just to make sure I was getting the right.
Right. So salary allocation. We
What's listed in the budget?
yeah.
Okay.
We need to go back and double check that, but we may be incorrect in that. That was done a year ago. So it may be burdened. It may include that.
Okay, thank you. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Christelle, I want to summarize with a question. Do you believe that if we have a codified structure with appropriate job titles, complete with appropriate job descriptions and appropriate qualifications, could we, not only presently but over administrations for the long haul, stabilize our parish government, and in doing so ensure that the efficiencies and improvements to performance that we desire can be accomplished and better services rendered to our citizens?
I do. I think that, as Will said, the stability will bring an air of professionalism, and will the attention given to continuity and the investment back in the employees, whether it's succession planning and training or role definition, communications, and I do want to come back to that for just a second before we end. And then building those standard operating procedures, like Councilman Lawler was talking about, where we need a dead end sign. You know, how does that go? And being able to tell, and you're starting to do this from what Ken Dawson told me today, that Public Works may be able to say, you know, they're responding within a certain period of time, and then they might be able to say, well, you know, we think we can get to that in about 45 days, or whatever it is. Tell me 2 years, tell me, you know, whatever, but tell me and then follow through on it. And so you begin to get trust from the citizens. When we started, the one question that made no sense to us was, why haven't you been able to really get a master plan, transportation, sewer, and citizens to invest in that, when you're legendary for voting for schools and things? And so we asked that to people. We asked that to everybody we could talk to, and They said, well, you got to trust what, you're voting on. You got to trust the people that you're going to give your money to. Okay, well, so what builds trust? It is the professionalism. It is the responsiveness. It is following through and doing what we're saying. It is knowing that employees are accounted for and my drainage fund money is going to that. And it's all those things. It's televising your meetings. It's being transparent. It's being able to open the budget or go online and finding it and having it, make sense and go in and track things. So long answer, but yes, I think that, and that will live on. Once you begin to start that transformation, it's hard at first, but it'll get easier as you go.
One more question. If we fail to codify our structure, to determine what people are working for the parish based on their qualifications, not upon whom they know, but upon their qualifications, and they are in jobs that have appropriate titles and descriptions. If we fail to do that, can we ever expect, first, to have the trust of the public, and then drilling down a little deeper into the administration side, can we ever create policies and procedures that have the ability to stand the test of time in each of those departments? That's two kind of sort of different questions, but they came to me.
Let me take both parts of it. When you begin to check people's qualifications and qualify people in positions rather than just who they know, you move away from being the Surge and Water Board in New Orleans to being an effective utilities operation or sewer operation. So just keep that in mind. If that's where everything we're hearing and things that are coming out just makes that brand even more, sorted and not professional, doing the things you're talking about definitely begins moving it the opposite way. And so when someone wants to move here, someone wants to open a business here, somebody wants to expand here, I'm going to make an investment of time and energy and money. What am I thinking about? Those are the things they really do think about, as my comments about St. Tammany, where people are saying, I'm picking up my business and I'm going there. There are a lot of people who are picking up their businesses and moving out of Louisiana because they think that our state has that reputation and we can't seem to quite get past that. And yet there's pockets in the state that are viewed differently. That's what I think. You want to be reliable and trustworthy, and those are the things that are definitely going to get you there. And then the last piece is that I think that the attention to that over a period of time, even when it's boring, and even when, oh yeah, we did that, we're doing that. Well, you're making some progress, and that's good, but you're not there yet. It is a long journey. And I think that that's where the council and administration over a period of time makes a big difference, because you can slide away from that, not fairly easily if it's really entrenched, but you can slide away from it. So it's going to take more than one administration to really make that happen. When we think about the parish governments that we work with, that's embedded in the way that they do things, they've been doing that way for a long time. So it's going to take time to do that, and it's going to take crossing administrations and crossing council members.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, I thank you for taking the, Mr. Dawson has another question. Yes, sir.
No, I wanted to make a motion.
Are
you ready? Yeah. So I'd like to make a motion that we accept the report, and realizing that we as the council, along with the administration, have a lot of work to do the implementation. And if I may, I'll pre-file a motion to adjourn after that.
Thank you for that pre-filed motion. I said I have. The chair has a motion to acknowledge this report It has a second. Are there any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes, and the pre-file motion to adjourn is heard. And we are adjourned.